Chapter 3. The Disciples' Reluctance to Visit Vimalakirti. Then the Likkhavi Vimalakirti thought to himself, I am sick, lying on my bed in pain, yet the Tathagata, the saint, the perfectly accomplished Buddha, does not consider or take pity upon me, and sends no one to inquire after my illness. The Lord knew this thought in the mind of Vimalakirti and said to the Venerable Sariputra, Sariputra, go to inquire after the illness of the Likkhavi Vimalakirti. Thus having been addressed, the Venerable Sariputra answered the Buddha, Lord, I am indeed reluctant to go to ask the Likkhavi Vimalakirti about his illness. Why? I remember one day when I was sitting at the foot of a tree in the forest, absorbed in contemplation. The Likkhavi Vimalakirti came to the foot of that tree and said to me, Reverend Sariputra, this is not the way to absorb yourself in contemplation. You should absorb yourself in contemplation so that neither body nor mind appear anywhere in the triple world. You should absorb yourself in contemplation in such a way that you can manifest all ordinary behavior without forsaking cessation. You should absorb yourself in contemplation in such a way that you can manifest the nature of an ordinary person without abandoning your cultivated spiritual nature. You should absorb yourself in contemplation so that the mind neither settles within nor moves without toward external forms. You should absorb yourself in contemplation in such a way that the 37 aids to enlightenment are manifest without deviation toward any convictions. You should absorb yourself in contemplation in such a way that you are released in liberation without abandoning the passions that are the province of the world. Reverend Sariputra, those who absorb themselves in contemplation in such a way are declared by the Lord to be truly absorbed in contemplation. Lord, when I heard this teaching, I was unable to reply and remained silent. Therefore, I am reluctant to go to ask that good man about his sickness. Then, the Buddha said to the Venerable Maudgalyayana, Maudgalyayana, go to the Likkhavi Vimalakirti to inquire about his illness. Maudgalyayana replied, Lord, I am indeed reluctant to go to the Likkhavi Vimalakirti to inquire about his illness. Why? I remember one day when I was teaching the Dharma to the householders in a square in the great city of Vaisali. And the Likkhavi Vimalakirti came along and said to me, Reverend Maudgalyayana, that is not the way to teach the Dharma to the householders in their white clothes. The Dharma must be taught according to reality. Reverend Maudgalyayana, the Dharma is without living beings. Because it is free of the dust of living beings, it is selfless. Because it is free of the dust of desire, it is lifeless. Because it is free of birth and death, it is without personalities. Because it dispenses with past origins and future destinies. The Dharma is peace and pacification. Because it is free from desire, it does not become an object because it is free of words and letters. It is inexpressible and it transcends all movement of mind. The Dharma is omnipresent because it is like infinite space. It is without color, mark, or shape because it is free of all process. It is without the concept of mind because it is free of the habitual notion of possession. It is without ideation because it is free of mind, thought, or consciousness. It is incomparable because it has no antithesis. It is without presumption of conditionality because it does not conform to causes. It permeates evenly all things, because all are included in the ultimate realm. It conforms to reality by means of the process of non-conformity. It abides at the reality limit, for it is utterly without fluctuation. It is immovable because it is independent of the 6 objects of sense. It is without coming and going, for it never stands still. It is compraised by voidness, is remarkable through signlessness, and is free of presumption and repudiation. Because of wishlessness, it is without establishment and rejection, without birth or destruction. It is without any fundamental consciousness, transcending the range of eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and thought. It is without highness and lowness. It abides without movement or activity.
Reverend Maudgalyayana, how could there be a teaching in regard to such a dharma? Reverend Maudgalyayana, even the expression to teach the dharma is presumptuous, and those who listen to it listen to presumption. Reverend Maudgalyayana, where there are no presumptuous words, there is no teacher of the dharma, no one to listen, and no one to understand. It is as if an illusory person were to teach the dharma to illusory people. Therefore, you should teach the dharma by keeping your mind on this. You should be adept in regard to the spiritual faculties of living beings, by means of the correct vision of the wisdom eye manifesting the great compassion, acknowledging the benevolent activity of the Buddha, purifying your intentions, understanding the definitive expressions of the Dharma. You should teach the Dharma in order that the continuity of the 3 jewels may never be interrupted. Lord, when Vimalakirti had discoursed thus, 800 householders in the crowd conceived the spirit of unexcelled perfect enlightenment, and I myself was speechless. Therefore, Lord, I am indeed reluctant to go to this good man to inquire about his illness. Then the Buddha said to the Venerable Mahakasyapa, Mahakasyapa, you go to the Lichavi Vimalakirti to inquire about his illness. Lord, I am indeed reluctant to go to the Lichavi Vimalakirti to inquire about his illness. Why? I remember one day when I was in the street of the poor begging for my food, the Lichavi Vimalakirti came along and said to me, Reverend Mahakasyapa, to avoid the houses of the wealthy and to favor the houses of the poor, this is partiality and benevolence. Reverend Mahakasyapa, you should dwell on the fact of the equality of things, and you should seek alms with consideration for all living beings at all times. You should beg your food in awareness of the ultimate non-existence of food. You should seek alms for the sake of eliminating the materialism of others. When you enter a town, you should keep in mind its actual voidness, yet you should proceed through it in order to develop men and women. You should enter homes as if entering the family of the Buddha. You should accept alms by not taking anything. You should see form like a man blind from birth, hear sounds as if they were echoes, smell scents as if they were winds, experience taste without any discrimination, touch tangibles in awareness of the ultimate, lack of contact in gnosis, and know things with the consciousness of an illusory creature. That which is without intrinsic substance and without imparted substance does not burn, and what does not burn will not be extinguished. Elder Mahakasyapa, if equipopized in the 8 liberations without transcending the 8 perversions, you can enter the equanimity of reality by means of the equanimity of perversion. And if you can make a gift to all living beings, and an offering to all the saints and Buddhas out of even a single measure of alms, then you yourself may eat thus when you eat. After offering, you should be neither affected by passions nor free of passions, neither involved in concentration nor free from concentration, neither living in the world nor abiding in liberation furthermore. Those who give such alms, reverend, have neither great merit nor small merit, neither gain nor loss. They should follow the way of the Buddhas, not the way of the disciples. Only in this way, Elder Mahakasyapa, is the practice of eating by alms meaningful. Lord, when I heard this teaching, I was astonished and thought, reverence to all bodhisattvas. If a lay bodhisattva may be endowed with such eloquence, who is there who would not conceive the spirit of unexcelled perfect enlightenment? From that time forth, I no longer recommend the vehicles of the disciples and of the solitary sages, but recommend the Mahayana. And thus, Lord, I am reluctant to go to this good man to inquire about his illness.
Then the Buddha said to the Venerable Subhuti, Subhuti, go to the Lichavi Vimalakirti to inquire about his illness. Subhuti replied, Lord, I am indeed reluctant to go to this good man to inquire about his illness. Why? My lord, I remember one day when I went to beg my food at the house of the Lichavi Vimalakirti in the great city of Vaisali. He took my bowl and filled it with some excellent food and said to me, Reverend Subhuti, take this food if you understand the equality of all things. By means of the equality of material objects, and if you understand the equality of all the attributes of the Buddha. By means of the equality of all things. Take this food if, without abandoning desire, hatred, and folly, you can avoid association with them. If you can follow the path of the single way without ever disturbing the egoistic views. If you can produce the knowledges and liberations without conquering ignorance and the craving for existence. If, by the equality of the 5 deadly sins, you reach the equality of liberation, if you are neither liberated nor bound, if you do not see the 4 holy truths yet are not the one who has not seen the truth, if you have not attained any fruit yet are not the one who has not attained, if you are an ordinary person yet have not the qualities of an ordinary person, if you are not holy yet are not unholy, if you are responsible for all things yet are free of any notion concerning anything. Take this food, Reverend Subhuti, if, without seeing the Buddha, hearing the Dharma, or serving the Sangha, you undertake the religious life under the 6 heterodox masters, namely Purna Kasyapa, Maskaring Sariputra, Samjayan Vairatiputra, Kakura Katyayana, Ajita Kesakambala, and Nirgrantha Jnaniputra, and follow the ways they prescribe. Take this food, Reverend Subhuti, if, entertaining all false views, you find neither extremes nor middle. If, bound up in the 8 adversities, you do not obtain favorable conditions. If, assimilating the passions, you do not attain purification. If the dispassion of all living beings is your dispassion, Reverend, if those who make offerings to you are not thereby purified, if those who offer you food, Reverend, still fall into the 3 bad migrations, if you associate with all maras, if you entertain all passions, If the nature of passions is the nature of a reverend, if you have hostile feelings toward all living beings, if you despise all the Buddhas, if you criticize all the teachings of the Buddha, if you do not rely on the Sangha, and finally, if you never enter ultimate liberation. Lord, when I heard these words of the Lichavi Vimalakirti, I wondered what I should say and what I should do. But I was totally in the dark, leaving the bowl. I was about to leave the house when the Lichavi Vimalakirti said to me, Reverend Subhuti, do not fear these words and pick up your bowl. What do you think? Reverend Subhuti, if it were an incarnation created by the Tathagata who spoke thus to you, would you be afraid? I answered, no indeed, noble sir. He then said, Reverend Subhuti, the nature of all things is like illusion, like a magical incarnation. So you should not fear them. Why? All words also have that nature, and thus the wise are not attached to words, nor do they fear them. Why? All language does not ultimately exist except as liberation. The nature of all things is liberation. When Vimalakirti had discoursed in this way, 200 gods obtained the pure doctrinal vision in regard to all things, without obscurity or defilement, and 500 gods obtained the conformative tolerance. As for me, I was speechless and unable to respond to him. Therefore, Lord, I am reluctant to go to this good man to inquire about his illness.
Then the Buddha said to the venerable Purna Putra, Purna, go to the Lichavi Vimalakirti to inquire about his illness. Purna replied, Lord, I am indeed reluctant to go to this good man to inquire about his illness. Why? Lord, I remember one day when I was teaching the Dharma to some young monks in the great forest, the Lichavi Vimalakirti came there and said to me, Reverend Purna, first concentrate yourself, regard the minds of these young bhikshus, and then teach them the Dharma. Do not put rotten food into a jeweled bowl. First understand the inclinations of these monks, and do not confuse priceless sapphires with glass beads. Reverend Purna, without examining the spiritual faculties of living beings, do not presume upon the one-sideness of their faculties. Do not wound those who are without wounds. Do not impose a narrow path upon those who aspire to a great path. Do not try to pour the great ocean into the hoof-print of an ox. Do not try to put Mount Sumeru into a grain of mustard. Do not confuse the brilliance of the sun with the light of a glowworm. And do not expose those who admire the roar of a lion to the howl of a jackal. Reverend Purna, all these monks were formerly engaged in the Mahayana, but have forgotten the spirit of enlightenment, so do not instruct them in the disciple vehicle. The disciple vehicle is not ultimately valid, and you disciples are like men blind from birth in regard to recognition of the degrees of the spiritual faculties of living beings. At that moment, the Lichavi Vimalakirti entered into such a concentration that those monks were caused to remember their various former existences, in which they had produced the roots of virtue by serving 500 Buddhas for the sake of perfect enlightenment. As soon as their own spirits of enlightenment had become clear to them, they bowed at the feet of that good man and pressed their palms together in reverence. He taught them the Dharma, and they all attained the stage of irreversibility from the spirit of unexcelled perfect enlightenment. It occurred to me then, the disciples who do not know the thoughts or the inclinations of others are not able to teach the Dharma to anyone. Why? These disciples are not expert in discerning the superiority and inferiority of the spiritual faculties of living beings, and they are not always in a state of concentrating like the Tathagata, the saint, the perfectly accomplished Buddha. Therefore, Lord, I am reluctant to go to that good man to inquire about his health.
The Buddha then said to the Venerable Mahakasyapa, Katyayana, go to the lick of Vimalakirti to inquire about his illness. Katyayana replied, Lord, I am indeed reluctant to go that good man to inquire about his illness. Why? Lord, I remember one day when, after the Lord had given some brief instruction to the monks, I was defining the expressions of that discourse by teaching the meaning of impermanence, suffering, selflessness, and peace. The Likshavi Vimalakirti came there and said to me, Reverend Mahakasyapa, do not teach him. The ultimate reality endowed with activity, production, and destruction. Reverend Mahakasyapa, nothing was ever destroyed, is destroyed, or will ever be destroyed. Such is the meaning of impermanence. The meaning of the realization of birthlessness through the realization of the voidness of the five aggregates is the meaning of suffering. The fact of the non-duality of self and selflessness is the meaning of selflessness. That which has no intrinsic substance and no other sort of substance does not burn. And what does not burn is not extinguished. Such lack of extinction is the meaning of peace. When he had discoursed thus, the minds of the monks were liberated from their defilements and entered a state of non-grasping. Therefore, Lord, I am reluctant to go to that good man to inquire about his illness. The Buddha then said to the Venerable Anuruddha, Anuruddha, go to the Likshavi Vimalakirti to inquire about his illness. My Lord, I am indeed reluctant to go that good man to inquire about his illness. Why? I remember, Lord, one day when I was taking a walk, the great Brahma named Subhuti and the 10,000 other Brahmas who accompany him illuminated the place with their radiance and, having bowed their heads at my feet, withdrew to one side and asked me, Reverend Anuruddha, you have been proclaimed by the Buddha to be the foremost among those who possess the divine eye. To what distance does the divine vision of the Venerable Anuruddha extend? I answered, friends, I see the entire billion-world galactic universe of the Lord Sakyamuni, just as plainly as a man of ordinary vision sees a myrobalan nut on the palm of his hand. When I had said these words, the Likshavi Vimalakirti came there and, having bowed his head at my feet, said to me, Reverend Anuruddha, is your divine eye compounded in nature? Or is it uncompounded in nature? If it is compounded in nature, it is the same as the super-knowledge of the heterodox. If it is uncompounded in nature, then it is not constructed and, as such, is incapable of seeing. Then, how do you see, O elder? At these words I became speechless, and Brahma also was amazed to hear this teaching from that good man. Having bowed to him, he said, "Who then in the world possesses the divine eye?" Vimalakirti answered, "In the world it is the Buddhas who have the divine eye. They see all the Buddha fields without even leaving their state of concentration, and without being affected by duality." Having heard these words, the 10,000 Brahmas were inspired with high resolve and conceived the spirit of unexcelled, perfect enlightenment. Having paid homage and respect both to me and to that good man, they disappeared. As for me, I remained speechless, and therefore I am reluctant to go to that good man to inquire about his illness.
The Buddha then said to the Venerable Upali, "Upali, go to the Likshavi Vimalakirti to inquire about his illness." Upali replied, "Lord, I am indeed reluctant to go to that good man to inquire about his illness." "Why?" "Lord, I remember that one day there were 2 monks who had committed some infraction and were too ashamed to appear before the Lord, so they came to me and said, 'Reverend Upali, we have both committed an infraction but are too ashamed to appear before the Buddha. Venerable Upali, kindly remove our anxieties by absolving us of these infractions.' Lord, while I was giving those 2 monks some religious discourse, the Likshavi Vimalakirti came there and said to me, 'Reverend Upali, do not aggravate further the sins of these 2 monks. Without perplexing them, relieve their remorse. Reverend Upali, sin is not to be apprehended within or without or between the two.' Why? The Buddha has said living beings are afflicted by the passions of thought, and they are purified by the purification of thought. Reverend Upali, the mind is neither within nor without, nor is it to be apprehended between the two. Sin is just the same as the mind, and all things are just the same as sin. They do not escape the same reality. Reverend Upali, this nature of the mind, by virtue of which your mind, Reverend, is liberated, does it ever become afflicted?" "Never," I replied. "Reverend Upali, the minds of all living beings have that very nature. Reverend Upali, passions consist of conceptualizations. The ultimate non-existence of these conceptualizations and imaginary fabrications, that is the purity, that is the intrinsic nature of the mind. Misapprehensions are passions. The ultimate absence of misapprehensions is the intrinsic nature of the mind. The presumption of self is passion. The absence of self is the intrinsic nature of the mind. Reverend Upali, all things are without production, destruction, and duration, like magical illusions, clouds, and lightning. All things are evanescent, not remaining even for an instant. All things are like dreams, hallucinations, and unreal visions. All things are like the reflection of the moon in water, and like a mirror image. They are born of mental construction. Those who know this are called the true upholders of the discipline, and those disciplined in that way are indeed well disciplined." Then the 2 monks said, "This householder is extremely well endowed with wisdom. The Reverend Upali, who was proclaimed by the Lord as the foremost of the upholders of the discipline, is not his equal.
I then said to the two monks, "Do not entertain the notion that he is a mere householder. Why? With the exception of the Tathagata himself, there is no disciple or bodhisattva capable of competing with his eloquence or rivaling the brilliance of his wisdom." Thereupon, the two monks, delivered from their anxieties and inspired with a high resolve, conceived the spirit of unexcelled, perfect enlightenment bowing down to that good man. They made the wish, "May all living beings attain eloquence such as this." Therefore, I am reluctant to go to that good man to inquire about his illness.
The Buddha then said to the Venerable Rahula, "Rahula, go to the Lichavi Vimalakirti to inquire about his illness." Rahula replied, "Lord, I am indeed reluctant to go to that good man to inquire about his illness." "Why?" "Lord, I remember that one day many young Lichavi gentlemen came to the place where I was and said to me, 'Reverend Rahula, you are the son of the Lord, and having renounced a kingdom of a universal monarch, you have left the world. What are the virtues and benefits you saw in leaving the world?' As I was teaching them properly the benefits and virtues of renouncing the world, the Lichavi Vimalakirti came there and, having greeted me, said, 'Reverend Rahula, you should not teach the benefits and virtues of renunciation in the way that you do.' Why? Renunciation is itself the very absence of virtues and benefits. Reverend Rahula, one may speak of benefits and virtues in regard to compounded things, but renunciation is uncompounded, and there can be no question of benefits and virtues in regard to the uncompounded Reverend Rahula. Renunciation is not material but is free of matter. It is free of the extreme views of beginning and end. It is the path of liberation. It is praised by the wise, embraced by the saints, and causes the defeat of all maras. It liberates from the 5 states of existence, purifies the 5 eyes, cultivates the 5 powers, and supports the 5 spiritual faculties. Renunciation is totally harmless to others and is not adulterated with evil things. It disciplines the heterodox, transcending all denominations. It is the bridge over the swamp of desire without grasping, and free of the habits of I and mine. It is without attachment and without disturbance, eliminating all commotion. It disciplines one's own mind and protects the minds of others. It favors mental quiescence and stimulates transcendental analysis. It is irreproachable in all respects, and so is called renunciation. Those who leave the mundane in this way are called truly renunciant. Young men renounce the world in the light of this clear teaching. The appearance of the Buddha is extremely rare. Human life endowed with leisure and opportunity is very hard to obtain. To be a human being is very precious. The young men complained, "But householder, we have heard the Tathagata declare that one should not renounce the world without the permission of one's parents." Vimalakirti answered, "Young men, you should cultivate yourselves intensively to conceive the spirit of unexcelled, perfect enlightenment, that in itself will be your renunciation and high ordination." Thereupon, 32 of the Lichavi youths conceived the spirit of unexcelled,
perfect enlightenment. Therefore, Lord, I am reluctant to go to that good man to inquire about his illness.